In today's video we're looking at standard parts again. So here we're going to add a family of parts component. So this first component we're going to just change the variables so they actually mean something. So currently we get those as variables. So we're going to have these as width, and then we're going to change the second one to height. So you can do this just with a dynamic edit, go to the variable name and then just change these values on there. So now if we go to our family of parts tab, just double check that these items are closing. If we just pin this, just make this a little bit easier, we can see we've got our width and height down the bottom, so we know what we're going to call these values. So let's just double check those and double check that these apply. So we're going to save this now, and now we're going to go into our standard parts administrator. So following on from video 1, working on the legacy standard parts, we're going to add parts. This time we're going to select add new user parts from family of parts master, and then we're going to browse to this part. So this is in my timber folder, so I'm going to grab this from the timber folder. This is the master file. So once we go into this and we've got that, it's then going to pick up all the versions. Might take a few seconds to pick up all the versions. I'm going to have all the values with the width and height values. So next we're going to decide what kind of part this is. So I'm going to class this as a frame section profile. So here we're going to do this as a solid shape, and now we need to decide what category we're going to do. So we're going to go into our 1PLM parts and create a new category in here for timber sections. And then remember, we need to think about what characteristics we're going to add to here. So it's quite obvious on here which ones we're going to do, so let's delete the ones that have been brought down from the 1PLM parts, and then we're going to find obviously height and width to match the options from the other ones. So remember, we can use this as a drop down, and we need to make sure these are both length on here. So normally you can just start typing and it will find the appropriate one. So we've got height, width, and then the other one we need to think about what we're going to call this. We've got two different types of wood. We've got a finished and a rough sawn. So let's have a scroll down, and then here we've got product grade, and that's just going to be text in that one. We need to make sure that it's in 1PLM. We've got to make sure there's a standard applied to it, because this is how we search for the parts. So now we need to decide which one's going to go where. So we need to make sure we get height and width in the wrong ones. If we do make a mistake on this, we can swap them around. So these are the options where we've got sawn and finished. So I'm just going to copy those up and down into each little one. So I'm just down arrow and paste all those. And now let's double check. Actually, we've got height and width the wrong way around, so let's just swap those around, make sure those are the right ones. Actually, we've got one of these values looks wrong. So we can see there's a 1250 on that one, where that should be 125. So we can just overwrite that here, but we need to go back to the part afterwards and make sure that that is actually done okay on there. So now we've got all those versions, we've got all those options filled in on this one. Next, and that's process all those parts, no errors on there, we've done that correct. On some of the later ones, notice we may actually make some mistakes on purpose. So now we're just going to jump back to the part, find that 125 and just double check and fix that error on there, just to make sure that now matches the option we've got on the standard parts there. So now if we go back to our standard parts administrator, we can see in the preview all the ones in all the correct sizes that we need on there. But to do your update database, just select the minimum amount that you need and then update those areas. So we've got 36 categories with multiple parts in each of those categories. Okay, so next let's have a look at creating parts for a fastener system. So we've got a bolt and a nut, and we've got an assembly that we're going to put these into. So we're going to look at using capture fit on these. So when we insert component, open documents, and just drag one of those items in. Actually, these have already got the capture fit on them. So let's just see how the capture fit works. So we've got face and then axis on those. We can always check those. We can always go in and just, so that is how we would add capture fit. We would just constrain it, go to capture fit, and then add. Notice the part does need to have right axis. So we're going to check the same with the nut. That's got the capture fit as well. That's good on there. Let's just go in there and just double check. So we've got those in the right order to make sure that it matches all of our other parts in there. So now let's go to our standard parts administrator. So if we go have a look in our 1PLM parts, we're gonna figure out where we're gonna put this one. So this one we have to create a new category. So just so I know where this is going. So we're going to use the top option again, use new part files. This time we're doing new manual entry, and then we're going to find where these files are. So if we go in there, we've got the fasteners folder, so we've got just these two in there, just so we can show. So now we've gone in there, actually we've got both a nut and a bolt. These need to go in their own little categories. So if we just select the nut and do remove selected, we've just got that, and because the way these go together, they've got different other options. So there's a lot more advanced options in this one. So we need to decide what we're doing, a bolt, what kind of bolt we're going to have. So we've got no contact face, and then we have a look at the head type that we've got on here. So we're going to do a socket head, and then we have a hexagon socket on that one, and then next. So here we need to now put our category in. So we're going to go to our 1PLM parts. We're going to create a fastener. Actually, let's call this bolts, washers and nuts. And then we need to create a subcategory within that one. So now we've got those ones. So we've got these options have been picked up near the one, but if we click on there, so we're doing a bolt, so let's just put the bolts in on there. Make sure we've got the standard on there. And then we're just going to delete those and just add our characteristics in here ourselves. So we're looking for, we can add material in here as well if we need to, but we're going to have thread text, and then we're going to have some kind of thread length option as well. So we've got those two options available in there. So now we go next. So we've got some other options on here. Notice there's a little, we've got the bolt on there. These options aren't showing by standard. So if we click on next, we can click on show additional properties. We'll do that in a minute, but let's have a look how we get these other properties on there. If we click the little eye for information, it's going to give the information from these bolts. So it's going to tell us what values we need for the bolt. We can also, while we're in here, we can press F1. That's going to take us to the help. So I know that the 17mm width over flats, the overall diameter of the end, countersink angle 0, HH is the head height, so we know 8 on this one. Length, we know this is 60. Bolt screw, shaft diameter, so that's going to be 10. And then we've got TC thread, and then we've got TX. So we've got all those options, and we can use F1 to find out more information on those. So we've got errors during the part. Click back and double check those. So here it may be that we've got a certain value correct. So we've got these options, but what we didn't do, we didn't actually put those other values in there. So we don't actually need HWC on there. So we can just have a double check on here. No, it's still no good. So let's go back. So it's the thread that we need. So if we now click this show additional properties at the bottom in a second. Okay, we can then see that thread option on there. So now we go on there, we can specify what that thread type is on there, and then scroll and look for any other properties that we need on there. Next. So there's also some additional errors. So we need to double check something else. So there's still one more property missing off there. So we've got our show additional properties. We've got both of those available. So what we've got a slight issue with the thread. It's not picking that one up. So now we've got that. We've got thread and thread length. We can now change that to 60. Now there's no more errors. So that's then part has now been successfully written on there. I've left those little errors in just because they're going to be the standard kind of errors that we're going to be looking for on there. That part is now available. As long as we put those values in correctly, that should work with the fastener system. So let's have a look how we do this with the nut. So we're going to do manual data entry. We're going to do the nut. Next, we're going to place this as a fastener system part, and we're going to choose the different types on here. So and do that nut. You could choose hexagon nut. So we're going to find the bolts, washers, and nuts folder, and then create a new category under there. So let's just create a category for nuts. and then we're looking for length and thread. We don't need the length, so we can just delete that one, and we're just going to keep the thread option on there. So we could also put other options as well. So we could have the over flat size. So that's down here somewhere. So if we have a look on there, so width across flats. So we've got that size on there. And but now we're looking for, depending on the nut type, we've got these different values on there. So we can go and have a look, and we can add, now we've got those options, we can see these options. So 19. TC is thread count. So if you wonder what that is, so if you've got 8mm bolt and you've got 1.5mm thread, it's going to be 5.33. So you may need to calculate that at a different time if you need to. So here is how we find the fastener system. So you go to help, go to the section that's showing on there, and then click on the icon I just clicked on there. It's just going to give us a little bit more information that we get on there. So we can use this as our guide to make sure that we've got all these options being correct on there. So thread count was wrong on there, so we should be able to make that. There we go, 5.333, that's right. So we've got our thread and our width across flats, so I forgot to put these two in. So let's just make sure we've got M10, and then M10 17mm over flats, so let's pop that one in. That's good, it's gone straight into there, successfully written, so that one's good to go in the fastener system as well. So we can keep going, putting those parts, only put one part from one type in at the same time on there. If you have got a standard part session open, you will have to go into Solid Edge and press F5 to do a database refresh as well when you do start to bring any of those bolts in. So next, let's have a look at creating pipes. So what we need to do when we've got a pipe system, we need to create coordinate systems. We need to create two for each input, one for each input-output area. So that one's going to be an input because the X is going in that direction. So if we don't know how to create coordinate systems, have a look for an option for creating coordinate systems. But we can create coordinate systems quite easy, but then we need to make sure that we're naming these so it gets picked up by the standard part system. So it's input underscore point underscore 1, and then we'll end up with a output underscore point underscore 1. So for this item we got one input, one output. So here we're going to do a key in option rather than geometry. So it's allowing us to use that and create one in an opposite direction. So once we finish that, we can see what that new one's going to look like. So that's actually in the same position. So we actually just need to go back to here and just make sure that we've got these orientations correctly. So currently, let's just set that one to 0. So that one's correct. That one's still incorrect. So we need the Z going in the opposite direction in there. So now we've got 180, 180. We've got the X coming in the opposite direction. So that is now good for output point underscore 1. And when we're doing any of these names, we can't have any gaps. We have to use an underscore if we want to use these. So now we need to do the same on the second one. So we're going to do geometry for the first one to make sure that's in the correct position. Accept, select what the X-axis wants to be, accept, select direction because that's going to be an input, select where the Y-axis wants to be. So try and match the original Y-axis. And then we're going to call that, so because the X-axis is pointing into the part, that's the input, we're going to show where that is going on there. So that allows us to match these coordinate systems when we're using this in the piping system. So now we're going to do the same on the geometry. So we're going to click our X direction on there, make sure we're going the other way. So we're doing it different on this one, so it's slightly easier using geometry while you're learning, but once you get good at it, you can use it based on another coordinate system. You know which ones to flip on there. So now we've got all our input and output points on that part. We can then save our part and then take this into the standard parts. This time we're going to use the add user part, manual data entry again on here. We're going to add our file, so we're going to find our PVC elbow option on there, and then we're going to go next. So we're going to say this is a piping points. So we've got 2 pairs, 1 input, 1 output per pair. And for each of these inputs and outputs, there's quite a few options we then need to add into it. So remember from the previous section, we had that little eye. That's going to tell us the information. We can also use F1 to get to that option. So if we create that in piping and create an option for elbows, we can decide what kind of size we want. So let's just delete the characteristics that we don't want, and then create just the characteristics that we need. So if we go for wall thickness on here, and then we're going to need some kind of diameter option as well. So let's see what we've got on there. So we've got those 2 options. Make sure we've got a standard. So when we're selecting it, we're actually selecting this standard. We can also have specification. It's just for reference really, but it's quite useful if you are doing something to a specification. So obviously this one, you can see from the file size it's DN50, so it might have been worth putting that in. So I've just added some sizes with some PMI on there, so we can see what the sizes are on here. Now this is where it gets a little bit more difficult. So we've got our input point, and we've got lots of different values that we need to change on here. So for each of these input points and output points, we've got 6 different options we need to go and fill in. So some of these I know, some of these we don't, so I'm just going to fill in some of these now. I think some of these should probably be 2, but here, if we go to our standard parts, and then click on that, click here for details again, that's going to give us, so we had Fastener system before, so that's going to explain what all these options mean on here. So if we're looking for CD, that's connecting diameter nominal of the opening. So we can put down whatever size we need to be on there. I'll actually put outside on here. It probably should be internal though, but just for this example, I'll leave that as it is. So that's an input point. So it's 1 for input, 2 for output. Just need to make sure we've got those options. NS, nominal size. So we need to find that value. So that's 60.33 on there. Let's just go back, pop that value in. So sequence number, so pipes have 2 pairs of coordinate systems, 1 and 2. Sequence number can be assigned to the pair, input output, or output input. So we just need to kind of have the first input and output need to have 1, second input and output need to have a sequence number of 2, unless it's linked to different diameters on there. So here we've got WT, so that's wall thickness, that's 6.35. Once you've done the first one, it kind of goes through and becomes part of the pattern. You'll recognise that you've got the 6 of these, and you can just keep going, popping those in, especially if you've got something where the input and output are the same size. You haven't got too much to kind of to change on there. So we've got output point there, so we've got a 2 value. And then we've got the ET, so that's at the bottom, that's not specified for the end treatment on there. And then we can go and add this. Next, if there's any errors, there are errors. So we can do back and go and find if there's a certain value that we missed on there. So we can go back, and then just scroll through and see if there's any values that are incorrect on there. So here we've got diameter and wall thickness are correct. We've got this set to elbow. Let's just double check that is elbow. Next. So there's still some errors. So let's go back and find out. So I'm just showing you this. So we've got, please correct the categories. So we know it's something to do with the categories, not the properties within it. So what I'm probably going to do, let's just go back and just create a new category. It may be that there's previously been a category called this, so let's just go and rename this category. So the error told us that, so I'm just going to call this elbow PVC. We can carry on, everything else gets remembered, so I'm going to worry about that. There we go, that's fine. Part data has now been written successfully, so we can now go and use that in the piping system there. So we've got our part ready to go, and that has been generated. Thank you very much. Any questions, please email me at chris.morgan@1plm.com. Thank you.